How could this happen? Mr. Chapman lost? Quentin's face was slack with shock as he beheld Stefan's injuries and the blood he was still coughing up as a result of the man's attack. He'd never anticipated the strength the Chunkster had shown. Not even Mr. Chapman could rival that kind of power. Who is that Chunkster? Not even Mr. Chapman could break through his defenses. Natasha's face grew serious. She was well aware of the extent of Stefan's capabilities. He was a martial artist who specialized in harnessing Thebady's internal energy, and his punches were enough to break through store. And yet, for someone of his expertise to have not been able to impact the other man in the slightest, it was evident that his opponent would not be easily defeated by ordinary means alone. If I'm not mistaken, he's Mr. Williams' second disciple. They call him Rotund Tiger. Mr. Wangley stroked his beard and said nonchalantly. This person might seem simple-minded, but the talent he possesses when it comes to martial arts is extraordinary. His body is capable of both attack and defense. It's tough yet flexible. It's very difficult for someone unfamiliar with his fighting style to take him on successfully. Mr. Wangley, can you take him on? Natasha asked in return. I can't guarantee a win, but I think I have an 80 to 90% chance of holding my own against him. Mr. Wangley's tone was proud. Good. Please do your best then, Mr. Wangley. Natasha nodded imperceptibly. Mr. Wangley, the man's weakness lies on the crown of his head. If you time your attacks well and seize the opportunity when it presents itself, you might be able to take him down in one strike. Dustin spoke up suddenly. It had only taken him a single round to discern the opponent's vulnerable spots. If they wanted to win, it was crucial to strike where the opponent was the weakest. Not only would that ensure an easy win, but it would also further guarantee their overall victory. What? Are you trying to tell me what to do? Mr. Wangley peered at Dustin out of the corner of his eye, his tone displeased. I'm just offering a friendly reminder. A reminder? Do I look like I need your reminders? Mr. Wangley sneered. Who do you think you are, boy? What right do you have to tell me how to take this man down? Do you think you're stronger than me? Dustin! Shut your mouth if you don't know what you're talking about. Does Mr. Wangley look like he needs your advice to win? Really, it's about time someone put you in your place for a change. Quentin was equally impatient. If you don't believe me, it's your call. Forget it, then. Dustin shrugged. There was no point in trying to reason with them anyway. He'd only thought to offer a suggestion out of pure goodwill. Since none of them appreciated it, he wouldn't scramble to make them listen, either, little brat. Keep your eyes wide open and look at how it really is done. Mr. Wangley turned and sprang away, leaving Dustin with those words. The older man scared into the battle ring like a proud eagle, landing steadily amid the feverish applause from the audience. Someone whistled, raucous cheers erupting all over in response to Mr. Wangley's elegant move. The Chunkster, however, paid him no attention. He picked up the fallen mutton leg and continued devouring it vehemently. Young man, that adamantine shield of yours is undeniably impressive, but unfortunately, you're faced with me tonight. It is only fate for you to end up as my stepping stone. Mr. Wangley placed both hands behind his back, arrogance permeating his features. Chunkster! Knock this old man out of the ring, and I'll treat you to a whole roasted lamb in return. Brody shouted from the audience. Lamb? Lamb? The Chunkster's eyes lit up as he turned to Mr. Wangley. At present, it was not a renowned fighter who stood before him but the promise of a fragrant, whole roasted lamb. Defeat you eat lamb. He struggled to utter a few words from his limited vocabulary before launching his first attack. With a stomp, the Chunkster charged toward Mr. Wangley like the sputtering engine of a car, violently aiming for a collision. Ineffectual amateur. Mr. Wangley flexed his soles and sprang, landing not a moment later on the Chunkster's back. Then, without pausing, he extended his fingers and struck the pressure points present on the Chunkster's back relentlessly. The Chunkster stumbled along with Mr. Wangley's momentum. He swayed, seconds away from losing his balance. Lamb? Meat? The Chunkster was growing impatient now. His assault became crazed and frantic, but Mr. Wangley was smart enough not to meet them head-on. Instead, he ducked agilely, launching a few sneak attacks here and there as he egged his opponent on. When it came to manipulating the pressure points of his opponent to turn the situation in his favor, he was, no doubt, an expert. He believed that no matter how strong the Chunkster's defenses were, he could effectively target his pressure points and bring him down, once and for all. At the end of the day, those were the points he believed to be the Chunkster's weaknesses. His idea was undeniably a good one, but as time passed, Mr. Wangley couldn't help but feel that something was off. Because of the chunkster's build, his defenses were different from the patterns exhibited by the usual adamantine shields wielded by the opponents he'd faced in the past. The lad on his body was key in dissipating the impact of his attempted attacks. As for the pressure points he'd been targeting all this while, they only proved to be mildly effective for a short period of time before fully recovering shortly after, rendering most of his strikes ineffective. After their long-withstanding struggle, the chunkster appeared to be spirited while Mr. Wangley seemed more out of breath than ever. The consumption of energy after channeling the internal energy he possessed drained him to the core. "This is impossible," Mr. Wangley exclaimed inwardly, his brow knitted. The chunkster's appearance was unremarkable, but he was extremely tenacious. "Mr. Wangley, try targeting the crown of his head. That's where his weakness lies." Natasha's voice rang out from the audience. No one believed Dustin but her. "That brat speaks nothing but nonsense. He's just trying to disrupt the state of my mind." Mr. Wangley's expression was icy. Not even he could identify the chunkster's weaknesses, let alone someone whose name he hadn't even heard of in his entire life. He was not about to believe his words just like that. "I need to finish this soon. And quickly." His stamina was swiftly waning and he couldn't afford to waste any more time. Mr. Wangley threw himself forward boldly, targeting a punch toward the chunkster's throat. That area had the least amount of flesh. It must be his opponent's weakest spot. If it landed where he intended to, the subsequent effects would be extraordinary. "Gotcha!" The chunkster grinned as he grabbed a hold of Mr. Wangley's wrist. "Shit!" Mr. Wangley's expression changed as the magnitude of the situation he was caught in dawned upon him. He was about to pull back, only to realize he couldn't break free. "Up you go!" The chunkster bellowed and tossed Mr. Wangley up in the air, spinning him around. About 10 rounds or so later, he swatted the old man like a fly and sent him crashing to the ground. A loud boom reverberated around the arena, shaking it momentarily. Mr. Wangley coughed up blood as he convulsed on the ground before stilling completely. He was severely injured, rendered motionless by the impact of his fall. That plummet must have also broken a great number of his bones. "Mr. Wangley." Quinton stood up immediately. Shock and, inexplicably, fear had taken hold of his features. When he'd watched Mr. Wangley's attempts to take control of the situation earlier, he thought victory was theirs at long last. Never in his wildest dreams would he imagine the tides to turn on them. "Quick! Get a doctor over here." Natasha's expression was stern as she ordered someone to lift Mr. Wangley off the ground. Even Mr. Wangley lost to this chunkster, could he actually be invincible? Ruth's brows were perpetually furrowed, worry evident on her face. The situation was far from optimistic after losing 2 rounds in a row. Another great master from the Harmons has fallen. "Looks like their loss today is inevitable." Otto shook his head. "Exactly. Competing against Boulderthorn today was a surefire way to bring disgrace upon themselves. Not even the Harmons could emerge victorious against an opponent this powerful." Julie grinned gleefully. After knowing that Dustin had connections with the Harmon family, she couldn't help but take pleasure in the misfortune of said family. "I wouldn't be so sure about that." Suddenly, a man spoke up from beside them. "I heard the Harmons still have their biggest trump card to turn this around." "What trump card?" Otto asked tentatively. "This trump card of theirs is none other than the warrior ranked 9th among the 100 immortals, the King of Kicks."